chicken feed. That has been quite the journey to get to the point I am now. What I use for chicken feed is a combination of many things, but I've narrowed it down to I use a whole grain mix, uncut whole grain mix. I use unmedicated chick starter, and that is pretty much the foundation of my chicken's diet, where I add bits and pieces in, but that is where I've settled. So the way I'm feeding my chickens is not really how most people feed their chickens. It's a little bit more labor intensive. It isn't quite as simple as just going to the store and buying one feed and just continuing to buy that feed month in and month out. But it's working really well for me. Where I first started with feeding my chickens was just like everyone starts, well pretty much I figure everyone starts this way. I went to the farm store and I bought a bag of layer feed because I had chickens for laying eggs, and that's what you do. And that worked okay. But I've come from a background in animal nutrition, not chicken specifically, but a lot of other animals, and I did know it was a lot more complicated than just buying a bag of feed from the store. So I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive to make sure I was ticking all those boxes for optimal nutrition for my flock. So how I started this epic chicken feed journey that I went on, I started on the internet like most people do when they have a question. I spent a lot of time looking at things on the internet. A great resource for me was Backyard Chickens. It's just backyardchickens.com. There are a lot of really smart people on there that are willing to help you on your chicken feeding journey. And I did do a few deep dives into research articles, which was fun for me, but might not be fun for everyone. First of all, I just tried to find a better quality feed than what I was finding locally. And I started buying in feed from specialty feed mills, specific places, but the shipping on getting that feed in started to be more than the bag of feed itself cost. So I needed a different way from ingredients that I could get locally, so I wasn't doubling my feed cost by adding shipping into that system. So where I went to after I decided this is a bit ridiculous, spending double on every bag of feed, is I went to what I could find locally. So I went into all the different farm stores to see, well, what do they have? Like, if I'm just gonna buy from you and I'm not gonna be such a princess about it, what do you have and how can I make this work? One of the factors that is important for me with my flock is I always have a mixed flock. And what I mean by that is I have hens that are laying, but I also have chicks a lot of during the year. There's not many months of the year I don't have young chickens in some phase of growing. And I have a rooster. And that means that my flock doesn't have the standard layer hen diet. They don't need that all the time. A layer hen diet has too much calcium for growing chickens, and it has too much calcium for roosters. And that can be bad for them if they're eating it day in, day out without a choice. So I was like, all right, how do I make this work? What I settled on was unmedicated chick starter. It's a high protein feed, and it's got a high level of vitamins and minerals because of course it's for growing chicks. You want them to grow up and be healthy. And I mixed that with about equal parts of whole grain, which I soak, which increases its digestibility because chickens are a monogastric animal. They have a simple digestion, so they need food sometimes to be more digestible for them. And soaking the feed makes it more digestible for their digestive system. So that's the basis of my chicken feeding diet, is half whole grain, half chick starter. And because I have growing stock most of the year, they need more protein than that is providing. The chick starter I buy at the store, that has enough protein for them, but I'm dropping the protein percentage by mixing it with whole grain. And to boost up the protein, I get meat meal. And that's a dried down, rendered product from cows and sheep, generally. And that's what they get. Now, what I do know is a lot of countries, you cannot get that as a feed to add to your chicken food. It's not actually legal in some countries to do that. That's a whole other thing that we're not going to get into. So if you're watching this video and you're trying to copy what I'm saying, you need to be careful that you are meeting the nutritional requirements of your chickens if you're moving away from that bagged feed for them. So they really do need a source of complete animal protein in the way that I'm doing it. A main factor in how I'm able to feed my chickens is that they do free range pretty much 24/7. I don't have the hugest yard for them to do that in. It's not acres upon acres of farmland and pasture, but they do have access to a wide variety of plants and trees and shrubs and worms and insects. So they are able to get a large portion of, I wouldn't say their energy requirement from foraging, but their vitamins and minerals and a protein top up from that. And again, if you aren't able to let your chickens do that, you're in a smaller area or you have major predator concerns where they can't just roam around at will, or they won't be roaming for very long, you do need to be more mindful, and maybe you need to stick closer to the bag of feed from the feed store, because there's nothing wrong with the bag of feed from the feed store. It is scientifically formulated for your chickens. It's not necessarily scientifically formulated for a mixed flock of heritage breed chickens that you want to live a long lifespan. So if you're stuck on, you don't have a choice other than to feed that bag, just top it up with the things that it doesn't lack, the fresh food that your chickens do need to be happy and healthy. And that's greens from your garden or greens from the supermarket, just little bits and pieces. Because another large component of, well, not large, an extra component of my chicken's diet is every single food scrap that comes out of our kitchen. And we eat relatively healthy food, so it's pretty healthy food they're getting. But that is another component of extra proteins and vitamins and minerals and salt and so on and so forth that they do need in small amounts to be healthy. And it gives them a variety because they get a bit bored day in, day out of the same feed. Chicken feeding is a really controversial topic, I think because people really love their chickens and they want to do the best for their chickens. And like anything in life, that creates strong opinions on what you think is the right way. And that is fine. But you really just need to think deeply about what it is that your chicken needs. If you have a chicken, it's a production red chicken. And what I mean by that is like the commercial laying hens, which lots of people have as their backyard chickens. If you have that chicken, you probably should just be feeding 85–90% of their diet out of a layer feed pellet from the feed store, because that chicken and that feed have been developed together. And a lot of people have that chicken, and you will run into issues moving outside of that framework. So some people may have a bad experience going away from the bag with their commercial chickens. And some people think that you just need to follow the science, and that is true. Those feeds are scientifically formulated, but again, they're scientifically formulated for a commercial environment where the main concern is how you get the most production for the least feed cost. And your chicken's only supposed to be alive in production for about 18 months for a layer hen. I want my chickens around a lot longer than that, living healthy lives, so I need to look outside that paradigm to make sure they're getting all the things they need to be long-lived, happy and healthy. How I know that how I'm feeding my chickens works for me is they look fantastic, and they lay eggs that taste fantastic with strong shells. They make babies that are healthy and strong. I've never had any issues with the chicks that have hatched. They're strong, they grow well, they have no deformities. And a great way to know if your chicken's diet is working for them is what happens when they go into their molt. That happens every year where they lose their feathers and regrow new feathers. And if they're struggling from a nutrition standpoint, that will be a rough process for them. They'll be quite miserable, and it will be slow for them to grow their feathers back. And that's generally not the case in my flock. They molt, they don't drop all their feathers all at once. They sort of replace them over time, and it's a pretty short process, and they look great afterwards. The most helpful advice, I think, for anyone just getting started is just start with what feels comfortable to you. Start with that bag of feed from the feed store that matches the kind of chicken that you have. For most people, that will be growing chicks that are going to go in towards laying hens. So just go to the store, buy the feed that is for that chicken. Buy chick starter, buy grower, and move them onto layer, and go on that journey with them. And add in your greens, your fruits, your vegetables, maybe some extra protein foods if you can get them in your country, and just watch what happens. Change things up. Are your chickens happier? Are they less happy? Are they laying eggs? Are they slowing down on laying eggs? And really look into it for yourself so you are comfortable with the knowledge you have and the outcomes you're getting from your chickens. But the basis of all chicken diets, they really do need to be based on a bag from the feed store. Trying to go away from that too far is way more expensive and impractical, and you're likely to miss a component because smart people have made those feeds. You can work around the edges, but I wouldn't recommend people jump off the cliff away from them completely. I'm very happy with where I've got to in my chicken feeding process. I don't have to think about it anymore. It just works. It's flexible, and I like that I found local choices, because shipping feed in is just don't do that. Just find what works for you where you are, and you will also have happy, healthy chickens with delicious eggs.